So this past Sunday, as you mentioned earlier, we observed Tisha B'Av, which commemorates the destruction of the first and second temples, as well as the exile of our ancestors, first by the Babylonians and later by the Romans. And I wonder, knowing the moment that we're in right now, as a Zionist, as an American Jew of conscience, what did this day of mourning feel like for you? Was it different than it has been in years past at all?
Yeah, it was very heavy, which it always is. Tisha B'Av is a heavy day, but it was exceptionally so this year. I had just returned from Israel, where I have shared with a lot of folks in the congregation and also in some of my writings, where so many people were expressing their profound exhaustion, their sense of just being stuck and not knowing how to get out of it. And it feels like you're just without hope, which is a terrible feeling.
I don't doubt it. For me, I think sometimes it feels like you're watching a car crash, but you're sort of stuck. Like you can see it happen, but there's nothing you can do about it. You can console the people who are there with you immediately, but you can't, and you want to get out there and you want to just be like, okay, let's deal with what's going on. But you're sort of stuck on the other side of this wall, which can be really dispiriting.
Exactly.
Tonight, as you also mentioned, begins Shabbat Nachamu, which is where we transition from from the feelings of mourning. We begin the first of 7 Sabbaths with special haftarot, selections from the prophet Isaiah that were meant to comfort our people in their exile. And I'm thinking, is there any imagery from the prophet that brings you comfort in this moment, the moment that we're experiencing now?
Yeah, it's such a powerful time of the year because we go through this period preceding Tisha B'Av where it's get heavier and heavier, the 3 weeks, and you feel it coming and you know it's going to be Tisha B'Av, and often it comes together in the northern hemisphere with the hottest part of the summer, and so you're feeling that as well. And then you get these 7 Shabbatot of consolation, which is so beautiful. And the job of the prophet is often described as you have to trouble the untroubled. When things are going well for people, you're the one who has to come and say, hey, everybody, you better watch yourself and change your ways because hard times are coming, and you're supposed to comfort the troubled. And so that's Isaiah's job right now. And so when we prepared for this, I went looking in this part of Isaiah, and I found a verse that I'd never studied seriously. Maybe I've come across it before, but I didn't remember it. And the Hebrew is so beautiful. It's in chapter 41 of Isaiah. And the prophet says to the Jewish people, Al tira, don't be afraid, ki imcha ani. God, he's speaking as God. God is with you. Al tishta, ki ani Elohecha. Don't be afraid. Don't fall apart in fear because I'm with you. And then the second half of that verse, there's this incredible repetition of words that are meant to strengthen us. Imatzticha, I will give you ometz. I'm going to give you strength. Af azarticha, and I will help you. Af temachticha, and I will give you tmicha. I will give you support. And then it says, bimin sitki, with my righteous right hand, which is an anthropomorphism, imagining God with this incredible strength, is saying, I will be there for you. And it's so beautiful, but it's also so powerfully challenging because, how many times have we cried out to God and quoted verses like this and said, God's going to be there with us. God's standing with us. God's going to be there every step of the way. And here we are 672 days into this nightmare, and we think of people like Eviatar in Rome, and what if they said a verse like this? How would they take a verse that says, I'm with you, I'm helping you, I'm supporting you? And we see that image again. If you saw it, you can't get it out of your head of Eviatar digging his own grave in one of the tunnels. Well, what does a verse like this do? And so my takeaway is that it's not something that we can rely upon literally. We know, dear God, we know so many times in the history of the Jewish people when we've cried out and said, where are you with that mighty right hand? And God wasn't there. but we have faith that God could be there. We have faith that God might be there. We have a faith that God will be there. And we also have this sense of faith that even if God doesn't come to rescue us from the dark tunnels of our lives, we will somehow endure. We will somehow get through it because we have this sense that we are not alone. God is caring for us somehow. God is watching us somehow. God is witnessing our pain. So it's a difficult response because I don't take this text literally and understand it as, okay, any moment God's going to come in and solve the problems of our lives, whether it's the war in Gaza or whether it's the problems in our personal lives. And yet this belief that God will give us ometz, God will give us ezra, God will give us tmicha, strength and help and support, and we can somehow find that in one another. I wanted to ask you the same question you just asked me. What's something that you came across in the tradition as you were preparing for this Shabbat Nachamu that gave you a sense of hope, a sense of strength, a sense of light?
Yeah, this is, it's an interesting haftarah. This was the first haftarah since my bar mitzvah that I ever learned how to chant. When I was in chaplaincy school at Fort Jackson, they didn't have enough people to chant haftarah, and the Jewish chaplain there was like, "Can you learn this haftarah?" So I'm like, okay, let me see what I can do. And I remember studying for this week's haftarah, and later in the haftarah, there's this line. I'm not going to do the whole haftarah because I
want
would
you to chant the whole thing for us.
Maybe when Cantor gets up here, we'll get the real deal. But it's just sort of the first part of it just has this repetition, and I don't know that the Hebrew itself is quite as inspiring. But when you pair it with the trope, it goes halo teduhu, halo tishmahu, halo. God merosh lachem, and then you get to the rest of the verse, which is, I know, it can happen.
That was good. That was really good. Kol hakavod.
But the English itself, the translation is really big. It's like, don't you know? Haven't you heard? Weren't you told from the very first? Don't you understand the foundations of the universe? Which seems like an odd line to comfort people with, right? We already have words of comfort. The Haftarah begins, Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami, comfort, comfort my people. And then this is where it goes. And I can't help but feel there's something, there's almost a kinsmanship, but also sort of a reminder that, our sufferings in the long scheme of the universe, as awful as they are somewhat finite, and that there is a force greater than us that wants just as much as we do for love and understanding to prevail, and that force will never desert us, that it's always there cheering for mutual understanding, for respect, for love, for peace, for friendship, for kinship among people. And just as we are crying about the world that we live in right now, I think God's crying for the world that we live in right now too. And even though that doesn't fix the problems, I don't know, it just gives me some comfort.
It's beautiful. And that image of God in this moment of trying to console, reminding us, very forcefully, don't you understand? Don't you know? And I think it's a reminder too that, sometimes we need to be held and we need to be hugged when we want that consolation. And sometimes we need a little kick, a gentle kick in the tush to say, you got to get up. You can't just sit there in your pain and pity yourself. You got to get up and do something. You've got to, and even if you can't change the things that are most threatening to you, at least you can think about, well, how am I going to respond? How am I going to act? So I appreciate very much that teaching.
Thank you, very kindly. And the other thing that I think that the teaching does, which is really, in really these 7 haftarot, which is really valuable, is I think it's a reminder that sometimes we need to feel the feelings, right? When our ancestors were exiled, we have an entire book of them feeling the feelings, the book of Echa, which we chanted on Saturday night. Sometimes you just need to be able to be upset. Sometimes you just need to be able to be angry. And I know, I mean, I can't tell you the amount of times when I've been talking to somebody here at the temple, whether it's in my office, they're sitting on the couch, or we just managed to run into one another somewhere here. And, they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm starting to cry because we're talking about something. I'm just like, no, this is the place. This is where you come to feel the feelings. This is where you come to be yourself. As long as it's not violent towards somebody else, please, let's remember
Those
that.
feelings you need to figure out a way to contain.
But that's why we belong to a place like Stephen Wise Temple, where we can come and see and be seen, and see people for who they truly are, and know that someone's going to see us for who we truly are in this moment.
Thank you, Rabbi Josh. I